Welcome to BL Stories, where romance, drama, and unforgettable boys' love come to life. Love knows no limits, and the best stories aren't always straight. Subscribe now and join our growing BL-loving family. Look away. Look away. Look away. I kept repeating it in my head, but my body refused to move. Swash was standing right there, dripping wet, towel nowhere in sight. Though he quickly reacted and covered himself after muttering something under his breath, I had already seen more than I wanted to. I didn't mean to stare, but come on, he looked like he walked out of a movie scene. Broad shoulders, defined muscles, damp auburn hair clinging to his skin. My brain finally caught up, and I managed to snap my eyes to the floor. "I'm so sorry, I didn't know you were still home," I blurted, my face burning. Why was he walking around like that anyway? I mean, sure, we were on the 7th floor with no nearby buildings peering in, but still. He didn't live alone. I looked up again and he was already gone. A moment later, I saw him step out of the guest room, towel finally secured, and using one I often used myself. "You took Bradley to school?" he asked calmly, as if nothing had just happened. "Why, yeah," I stammered, still feeling rattled. My heart hadn't quite returned to normal yet. Swash, on the other hand, seemed completely unfazed. He gestured for me to move out of the way of the doorway. I did, and he closed the door behind me. I wandered to the couch and sat down, guilt weighing heavily on my shoulders. "Don't think about him, Michael. It's never going to happen." I thought about the expression on his face, blank, cold. Maybe I was still on thin ice after walking out on them. Even though Bradley and I had patched things up, Swash seemed far from ready to forgive me. And I couldn't really blame him. He'd had a rough few days, and a lot of it was my fault. Still, I wanted to stay in Bradley's life. That kid made me feel like I mattered. Like I wasn't just existing. I didn't want to let him down. Swash came out of the room again. "You should have woken me up," he said. "You looked like you really needed the rest," I replied. "I also really need to work. Things don't pay for themselves." Sorry. Are you picking up Bradley today?" "I guess so. Have him home by 5. Here, cab money." He handed me a $100 bill. I took it and looked up at him, but he wouldn't meet my gaze. His eyes had lost their usual spark. It stung. Maybe he didn't even see me as a friend anymore. Not long ago, I was the angry one waiting for an apology. Now the roles had flipped. Swash grabbed his bag and left without another word. Silence filled the space again. I turned on the TV to distract myself. Discovery Channel was playing. I figured I could use some trivia to chat about with Bradley later. At least someone in this house was still talking to me. My phone rang, slicing through the quiet. "Hello." "Hey, Venison." Emmett's voice came through, cheerful as always. "What's up, Em?" "We're at the airport, heading back. I trust you didn't burn the place down in our absence?" "I tried not to. It got a little boring, to be honest." "No biggie. We can monitor things remotely. So, how's Swash?" "He's fine," I said, trying not to let anything slip. "You sure? You sound off. What's going on?" "What do you mean?" "Mike, I know you. Something's bothering you. Trouble in paradise?" I sighed. The truth was going to come out eventually. But I wasn't about to launch into the whole "I'm not actually with Malone" lust hanging around Swash's apartment explanation over the phone. "Tell you what. When you're back in Chicago, we'll talk." "Alright, just remember, we care about you. You're more than just an employee. You're family. We actually care about what happens to you." "It's nice hearing it like that. Thanks." Emmett chuckled and hung up. I sat back, letting the TV buzz in the background. I knew I needed to start job hunting. I had to plan my move. There were things I needed to prepare if I was going to stay with Malone. But for now, Bradley was the priority. Malone would just have to wait. I stood up and headed for the shower. I wasn't exactly smelling like roses. I honestly don't know how it got to 2 p.m. so quickly, but soon I was out the door, feeling oddly excited. I wore the clothes Swash had bought for me, probably a bit too dressy for picking up a 4-year-old, but I wasn't going to complain about looking sharp. At the school, I walked into the reception area and passed a woman at the front desk. She gave me a curious look. "Excuse me," she called. I turned back. "Are you a parent here? Do you have a child in this school?" Yeah. I didn't feel the need to explain my exact relationship to Bradley. Maybe she just needed help with something. "Wow, you're so young," she said with a bashful smile. "Sorry, my name's Rita Clark. My daughter Emily's in first grade. I'm organizing a small get-together for the other parents to connect, and I was wondering." She was blushing. I suddenly realized this was an invitation and a soft attempt at flirting. "Sure," I said casually. "Really? Oh, thank you. I mean, thanks for being open to it." "I thought that's what get-togethers are for," I replied with a polite grin. She beamed. "Well, I'll leave the rest with the receptionist, but here's yours." She handed me an envelope. "Thanks. Time and place are inside. I really hope you'll come." She was charming, I couldn't lie, but I wasn't interested. Maybe I'd pass the invite to Swash. He could probably use a few more friendly faces in his life. As far as I knew, his only real friend was Rodney. I tucked the envelope into my jacket pocket and walked toward Bradley's classroom. "Hello, Michael." "Hi, Mrs. Perry. You know, you can call me Sylvia. I call you by your first name, after all." "Oh, sorry. I didn't know we were on a first-name basis." "We already are." She smiled. Bradley peeked out from behind her, beaming. My heart lifted. "Hey, kiddo. Ready to go?" "I finished it," he exclaimed. "Finished what?" I asked, confused. Sylvia giggled and pointed to the shelf behind her. There it was, Bradley's Lego house. 4 floors, carefully arranged windows, and even color coding for each level. A few imperfections here and there, but still impressive. "Wow. I know, right?" Sylvia said. "You should consider Mensa." "I did," I said with mock seriousness. But I didn't want his genius to get dragged down by the rest of us. She frowned for half a second before laughing. Bradley, meanwhile, looked between us with uncertainty. I crouched beside him and gently explained, "I just told her you're smarter than all the smartest kids in the world." He blushed and turned away. I ruffled his hair, smiling. "Goodbye, Sylvia," I said. "Bye, Michael." "Goodbye, Michael," Sylvia said through soft giggles. I stepped out of the classroom, and Bradley bolted ahead, full of energy. It felt good to see him that happy. Honestly, he looked even brighter than before I'd left. I followed him outside, buttoning my coat tighter. The wind had a sharp bite today. Bradley stopped near the entrance to grab his jacket, but as he unzipped his backpack, a gust of wind sent a few papers flying. He squealed and chased after them. "I got it!" I shouted, sprinting after the loose pages. Chicago's wind wasn't doing me any favors. I managed to pin down 3 of them by stepping on them, but the 4th fluttered off into a nearby park. I paused to catch my breath. Was I seriously winded after that? Maybe I needed to get back to the gym, eventually. I walked into the park, spotting the final sheet pressed against a bench. As I bent to pick it up, an ad on the backrest caught my eye. A woman was lying in bed with a dream bubble over her head. Inside the bubble, she was wearing a wedding dress and angrily holding up what looked like a sausage on a toothpick, seemingly yelling at her husband. The caption underneath read, "You wouldn't dream of anything else." I blinked. What was that even supposed to mean? The company name below wasn't one I recognized. I gave up trying to decode it and turned to head back. The wind hit harder on the walk back, sharp and unforgiving. It made breathing difficult. As I neared the school gates, my steps froze. Bradley was gone. Panic gripped my chest. I ran back into the school, nearly slipping on the slick tiles of the entryway. There he was, safe, sitting in the reception area, chatting with Rita, the woman who had invited me earlier. Relief flooded me, followed quickly by suspicion. What was she talking to him about? I stepped inside, and Bradley looked up. Rita stood abruptly, as if I'd caught her doing something she wasn't supposed to. I handed the papers back to Bradley. "Thanks," he said quietly. "He's a brilliant child," Rita remarked. "Huh. I hadn't been paying attention." "Bradley, right?" she asked, confirming his name. He nodded. "He was telling me all about animals. He really knows a lot." That's from watching National Geographic, I said with a chuckle. She laughed too, but her smile turned curious. How old were you when you had him? You must have been pretty young. I froze. It was getting trickier to explain this now that she had actually met Bradley. Given the age gap, it would have meant I was 15 when he was born. I started to speak, nervously. Actually, I'm sorry if that's too personal, she cut in. You just looked uncomfortable. I mean, if you and his mom were young and figuring things out, maybe it was an accident or… Michael's gay, Bradley said matter-of-factly. Silence. Her eyes darted between the two of us. I gave a small shrug. It was out now. She flushed red. Oh, I see. Excuse me. Without another word, she turned and walked off toward the classrooms. That was unexpected. I wasn't sure if it was shock, discomfort, or just embarrassment on her part. Either way, I figured I'd just been spared from attending her parent gathering. Small blessings. I sighed and looked at Bradley. Thanks a lot, kiddo. He smiled like he hadn't just dropped a truth bomb in the middle of the reception area. Let's head home. We walked together, hand in hand, but after 15 minutes of waiting and no cab in sight, I suggested we start walking toward a busier street. Bradley looked tired, and likely hungry too. Where should we go today? I asked in my best cryptic tone, trying to match his usual mysterious energy. He raised his eyebrows at me, giving me a look that screamed Swash vibes. I almost laughed out loud. He pointed ahead without saying a word. I followed the direction of his finger and saw a cafe, but then noticed a taxi across the street. Still unsure what he meant, I asked, "Where should we go to eat?" His hand stayed up. That's when I noticed the McDonald's sign, slightly hidden behind the cafes. From his height, it was probably the only thing he could clearly see. I laughed. Of course. We headed inside. I bought burgers and fries, and Bradley asked for another kid's meal just to get an extra toy. I didn't even hesitate. We ate hungrily, chatting between bites. He told me he wanted to work with animals when he grew up. I asked if that meant becoming a vet, a zookeeper, or maybe a wildlife expert. He didn't quite get the job titles, but he was absolutely sure about one thing. He just wanted to be around animals. You should talk to Swash about it, I said. That seemed to satisfy him. We finished our meal, and I checked the time. 3:03 p.m. I remembered Swash's clear instruction, have him home by 5. We had time to spare, but I wasn't going to risk running late. Not with Chicago traffic. All right, let's go. We finally flagged down a cab after about 15 minutes of searching. Bradley had grown tired, so I carried his backpack while he leaned against me, looking half asleep. We made it home by 4:06 p.m. Traffic hadn't been bad, but the cab driver had taken an unfamiliar route, veering away from the main streets. We got a little turned around, and unsurprisingly, that detour still showed up on the fare. Once inside, I took Bradley to his room for a quick nap, then settled on the couch. Swash was expected back sometime before 6, though I still didn't know his exact schedule. Funny how I hadn't bothered to ask. It wasn't because I didn't care, more like I was afraid to get too involved. Everything I knew about Swash was from what he had offered on his own. I had avoided digging deeper, like learning more about him would somehow blur the boundary I was trying so hard to maintain. But did that really work? Knowing more didn't necessarily mean feeling more, right? I shook my head and turned on the TV. That vampire show was on again, the one where the girl was still miraculously not eaten. I sighed, half watching. Swash came home at 6:14 p.m. He gave a quiet greeting and went straight to his room. I guess we were still barely speaking. Maybe that was for the best. Keeping some distance helped me keep my emotions in check. Sure, there was a bit of tension I couldn't fully ignore. He was attractive, but that alone wasn't the issue. It was all the other things that made him harder to ignore. How he cared for Bradley, how he carried himself with quiet confidence, how he made an effort to be kind even when we weren't on the best terms. Still, he wasn't available. And besides, my heart was still tied to Malone, who wasn't a dad, didn't come with complicated layers, and whose mischief and warmth matched mine far more easily. It should have been a simple choice. So why did I keep overthinking it? Swash reemerged about 20 minutes later, dressed casually in a white t-shirt and shorts. He headed into the kitchen and started preparing dinner. I stood up and wandered in, not wanting to just sit around. "Can I help with anything?" I asked, trying to sound neutral. He glanced at me, cautiously. "Can you peel these?" He gestured to a few potatoes on the counter. "Sure," I said. I wasn't thrilled, but it wasn't about me. I wanted to be helpful. While I peeled, Swash focused on seasoning a large steak. He worked efficiently, clearly experienced. I just tried to keep up. When I was done, he had already moved on to prepping vegetables. I rinsed the potatoes, left them in a bowl, and stepped back. "Thanks," he muttered without looking up. He seemed nearly finished, so I excused myself to wash up in the bathroom. I stayed a little longer than necessary to give him space. When I returned, the potatoes were already boiling, the steak was in the oven, and the vegetables were soaking. He was now staring absently at the TV. In that quiet moment, with the warm light from the kitchen casting shadows behind him, he looked every bit the part, calm, composed, dependable. The man of the house, as people would say. I eased into the couch without saying anything. A few minutes later, he checked the steak, wiped his brow, and continued preparing dinner. Even cooking, he made it look effortless. I watched as he mashed the potatoes with care, adding his usual mix of spices. I had no idea where he learned his recipes, but they always turned out great. "Wake Bradley up. Dinner will be ready soon," he said without turning. I nodded and went to wake the little guy. By the time Bradley was up and washed, Swash had already plated everything. The three of us sat down together to a meal of seasoned steak, flavorful mashed potatoes, and mixed vegetables. It looked healthy and tasted amazing. Dinner was quiet, but not in a tense way. Swash chatted with Bradley here and there and even remained polite with me. I appreciated the civility. Maybe he was just trying to keep things stable for his son. I could respect that. After dinner, Swash excused himself, saying he had work to do. I stayed with Bradley until 9 p.m., then helped him get ready for bed. He asked if I could stay with him through the night. I agreed, and thankfully he slept soundly. No nightmares this time. I woke up the next morning to find Bradley already gone. Early riser, clearly. I went to freshen up and brush my teeth. Morning breath was never my favorite companion. By the time I got out, it was 7:20. I had overslept. Bradley and Swash were already having breakfast when I mumbled a sleepy, "good morning," and joined them. Bradley kept giving me a curious look. I checked my clothes. Nothing odd. My hair? Fine. I raised an eyebrow at him, silently asking what? He took the cue. "Dad," he said, "Michael was doing something funny last night." Swash paused, fork in midair, and looked at me. Bradley continued innocently. He was hugging me. But there was something weird. His pants felt hard. Swash froze. My eyes widened. My brain scrambled for an explanation. Then it hit me, and I mentally face-bombed. Oh no. I stared down at my plate, cheeks burning. Swash was looking at me with a strange expression, somewhere between suspicion and disbelief. The air around us was thick with discomfort. I didn't know how to explain it. It wasn't what it looked like. I tried to speak, but the words just wouldn't come. My face flushed even deeper. I looked to Swash for help, hoping he'd understand I hadn't meant for anything weird to happen. His expression slowly changed. The sternness faded, replaced by a flicker of amusement in his eyes. He seemed to recognize that this was just one of those strange, awkward moments that life throws at you. And truthfully, if I was going to sleepwalk next to anyone, it would have been him. Swash glanced at Bradley, who was still staring at me curiously. "I think it's time for you to start sleeping in your own bed, Brad," he said gently. Bradley didn't protest. His curiosity seemed stronger than his fear of nightmares. "But what was that thing I felt?" he asked innocently. Swash kept a calm tone. "It's something that happens when you get older." Bradley tilted his head. "But what was it?" I sighed, trying to keep it age-appropriate but honest. Sometimes, as boys grow up, their bodies do things on their own. It doesn't mean anything bad. It just happens. Especially when you're asleep. Swash gave me a look, one that said, "Please keep it simple." I nodded slightly, adjusting my tone. It's nothing to worry about, Bradley, I said, reassuring him. And no, it doesn't hurt. It's just something your body does sometimes without warning, like sneezing or getting goosebumps. Bradley still looked unsure. You mean that kind of stuff will happen to me too? Eventually, yes, I replied with a small, understanding smile. It's normal. You'll learn more about it as you get older. Okay. He nodded, more satisfied than confused now, and went back to eating his eggs. I let out a breath, thankful he didn't ask any more questions. I gave Swash a glance that said, "See? No big deal." He didn't smile back, but his eyes told me he appreciated how I handled it. Breakfast ended quickly. Swash guided Bradley to the elevator. "Swash, I'll be out for a few hours today," I said casually. "Okay," he replied flatly. I waited a second. "Aren't you going to ask where I'm going?" "You're 20, not 2, he answered without looking at me. The elevator doors closed, leaving me with the echo of his words. Clearly, there were still lingering feelings about me walking out on them before. Whatever spark of warmth I'd seen this morning wasn't about me, it was just about the moment. I sighed and pulled out my phone. "Hey, baby," I said as the call connected. "You didn't come yesterday," Malone replied with a little sigh. "I know. I said I'd call if I could." "You still could have told me you weren't coming. I was really looking forward to it." "Well, that's not completely my fault, is it?" "Yes. Is." Malone playfully emphasized each word. "Maybe if you weren't so cute, I wouldn't care so much." I chuckled. "So, you only like me for my looks? I'm not that shallow. There's also your winning charm," he teased. I laughed again. Malone always had a way of brightening my mood. He made things feel lighter. "I'll try to see you today." "I really miss you, Mal." "You know I miss you too. Now say the magic words to make my heart happy." "I love you." "Those were yesterday's," he said with a grin in his voice. I smiled. "What is today's then?" "Come over and I'll tell you." I laughed, hanging up with a soft grin on my face. Just then, the phone rang again. "Emmett." "Hey, Em," I answered. "What's up, awful? You coming in today?" "Yeah. Just need to freshen up. I'll be there in like 30 minutes, an hour top." "Great. We'll be waiting." Alex took the week off. He's keeping me company." "Oh boy," I muttered. "This conversation is over." I ended the call and chuckled to myself. Heading to the bathroom, a wave of unease crept in. I wasn't exactly looking forward to Emmett's questions. He could go from sarcastic best friend to concerned parent in a heartbeat. But I pushed the thought away as I stepped into the shower. Whatever happens, happens, I'd deal with it. I unlocked the door to Dorian's apartment cautiously, as if coming in quietly would somehow soften their reactions. Almost immediately, Emmett let out an excited squeal and pulled me into a tight hug. Alex was lounging on the couch like he owned the place. He always reminded me of a lion, cool, calm, and resting like he ruled the jungle. Emmett stepped back and smiled at me, his green-gray eyes sparkling. "We really missed you, Mike." "I can tell," I said laughing. He dusted something off my shoulder before heading back to his computer chair. I followed him and flopped onto the couch beside Alex. "Hey, Michael," Alex said in his usual smooth tone. "Alex, hope I'm not interrupting anything." "Obviously not. Em's got this place running like clockwork. Breaks are only allowed at noon." "Tough." "I'm used to it," Alex said with a shrug. "You should have seen him at the wedding. He was basically the wedding planner." "I wasn't that bad," Emmett protested. "But seriously, who puts a giant flower arrangement in the middle of every table? No one could see each other." "You didn't have to get dramatic about it. Thank goodness Rob was there to calm you down." We all laughed. But then Emmett turned serious. He swiveled in his chair and looked directly at me. "So, what's going on with Swash? Give us the details." I sighed. "First off, Swash and I aren't dating." "Okay," Emmett tilted his head. "So was it just a long sleepover?" "No," I said quickly. I didn't want to rush the explanation, but this was tricky to put into words without sounding strange. Alex frowned slightly. "Wait, So you're not dating and you're not involved? Correct. So what are you two? Emmett asked again, his tone cautious. Would you believe me if I said we're just friends? Alex didn't respond. Emmett stared at me, clearly trying to figure out if I was joking. He rubbed his forehead, already exasperated. Let me get this straight, he said slowly. Swash, who's supposedly just a friend, paid over $23,000 so you could hang out? Technically, it's only about $1,500. How? He's just covering the company charges, I replied, glancing away, guilt creeping in. He's not paying me personally to stay with him. They both looked stunned, Emmett especially, who suddenly looked like he'd connected the dots. So, you're telling me Swash booked you for 2 weeks, blocking out everyone else, and only paid the base fee? That sounds like something you set up. What were you thinking, Michael? Do you even realize how much you could have earned during that time? We're still within those 2 weeks, right? I nodded. I just needed a break. You should have told us. We could have worked something out. Instead, you disappeared to some guy's place for 2 weeks and now everyone thinks you've hit the jackpot. Did you take any other jobs at all? Just my station shift 2 days ago. Alex chimed in. Do you have another job lined up? I shook my head. Emmett leaned back in his chair and sighed heavily, sorting through the mess in his mind. Despite the tension, I admired his ability to stay focused when things got complicated. It reminded me of Bradley, driven and steady. Well, Emmett said, at least the company got its cut, so we don't need to involve Dorian. But how do you plan on covering the rest of this? I don't know yet, but I'll figure something out. Maybe we could help with a small loan until… No, Alex. That would just be borrowing from one pocket to pay another. Besides, Swash and I are friends. We'll work something out. They both sighed, clearly frustrated but still concerned. I glanced at the two of them. If anything, this moment confirmed they'd make great parents one day. They worried in different ways, but they always came from a place of care. Not like others who only pointed fingers. Just then, the computer made a soft alert sound. Emmett turned to check it. Alex was still staring at me, like he was trying to solve a puzzle. I gave him a small smile. His eyebrows lifted as if he just remembered something. Oh no, I totally forgot I was supposed to see Jason. What time is it? 11:23, Emmett said without looking up. I guess I should go then. Alex stood from his chair. But you'll miss your favorite part of the day, Emmett teased with a dramatic pout. The switch in tone made me laugh a little. 1 minute serious, the next completely playful. Alex walked over and gave Emmett a gentle, lingering kiss. It was sweet, even if it felt a little long. When they finally separated, Emmett's eyes were still closed, a smile on his face. Go now, before I change my mind, he said with a grin. Alex turned to me. Want to come along? Sure, as long as I'm back by 2. I have somewhere to be. Alex's car was small but cozy, with a piney, woodsy scent that reminded me of camping trips. We drove in silence, which gave me time to get lost in thought. Our conversation had clarified things about Swash, but Malone hadn't come up at all. I wondered if I should have mentioned him. After all, he was the reason I was stepping away from everything. Emmett thought it was about Swash. Maybe he'd forgotten our earlier talks and was just reacting to the moment. The car made a quick turn and St. Joseph's Hospital came into view. A wave of anticipation hit me. I hadn't seen Jason in a week, and I felt a little guilty about it, though there hadn't been much I could do. Inside, we waited for someone to help us. Eventually, a nurse led us to Jason's room, except he wasn't there. A young doctor, maybe in his late 20s, soon came to speak with us. You're here for Mr. Fuller? Yes, Alex answered. He was transferred to the rehabilitation wing earlier today. His brother was concerned about his recovery, so we've started physiotherapy. He was bedridden and extremely anemic. There's been some muscle atrophy, which is why we've begun treatment. Can we see him? Not at the moment. He's still in a therapy session. Maybe later today. Do we have your contact information? Yes, you do, Alex replied. He looked disappointed not to see Jason, but there was hope in his eyes. Jason was recovering. That was a good sign. We thanked the doctor and stepped out of the hospital. I checked my phone. 12:48. I let Alex know I had another appointment, so we said our goodbyes and he left on his own. I caught a cab and headed to Bradley's school. It was still early, but I had nowhere else to be. I could have gone back to Emmett's place, but I wasn't in the mood to talk more about Malone. Besides, he and Alex were probably enjoying their alone time, and I definitely didn't want to walk in on that. I arrived by 1:25 p.m. and spent time window shopping around the area, sneaking glances at my phone every few minutes. Most of the stores weren't anything special. At 1:50, I made my way back toward the school. The number of cars outside surprised me, no wonder I hadn't noticed before. I usually came late. The front was packed with waiting parents, most of them moms chatting in the reception area. I didn't feel like joining in, so I waited outside, quietly watching the street. I'm really sorry about yesterday. I turned around and saw Rita standing there. She looked a little embarrassed, but she was trying to smile. I smiled back. It's okay. I should have just told you from the beginning that I'm gay. But that's not exactly something you casually bring up in conversation. Bradley didn't seem to mind. I chuckled and she laughed too. She really was beautiful. I couldn't quite figure out why someone like her would be interested in me. I was clearly younger. But she wasn't that much older either, maybe around 28 to 32. I just felt really awkward, she admitted. And I have let's call it a unique way of handling embarrassment. You mean you just turn around and walk away? I asked with a smirk. Hey, it was either that or cover my face and stare at the sky. We both laughed. She was different. A woman like her should have admirers lined up, but maybe having a child made some people hesitate. I kind of figured you liked me the moment we started talking, I said casually. She raised an eyebrow, amused. Really? Is that some sort of special talent, or am I just that obvious? Don't try acting. It's not your calling, I teased. She laughed again. I liked her laugh. It wasn't overly polished or theatrical, it was real. Maybe we could make this work, she said thoughtfully. I've always wanted a gay best friend. Careful with that stereotype, some of us aren't exactly shopping experts, I grinned. She giggled and I felt a genuine warmth between us. Maybe we really could be friends. There's nothing wrong with making connections, regardless of gender. She pulled out a business card, scribbled something on the back, and handed it to me. I noticed the crowd around us was beginning to shift. School pickup time was in full swing. Here's my number, my personal one, she said. Maybe we can hang out sometime if you're not too busy with your son. Thanks. Just one thing, he's not my son. I'm just friends with his dad. She looked relieved but also a bit surprised. Oh, that makes more sense. But honestly, you could have fooled me. You two even look a little alike. And the way he looks at you, he must really care about you. I care about him too, I said with a laugh. She gave a quick smile. Anyway, I've got to pick up Emily. See you around, Michael. You too, Rita. She disappeared into the sea of parents. I glanced at the card. Turns out she was a wedding planner. I chuckled to myself, imagining how she'd handle my friends. Emmett would probably give her a hard time, but she looked like she could handle it. I headed to Bradley's classroom. Mrs. Perry was talking to some other parents but managed to wave at me. Bradley came running over and stopped just in front of me. He looked up and smiled, that same gentle, open smile he gave me yesterday. My heart softened. I smiled back and hoped I wasn't being too obvious. We left the school and waited for a cab. Can I give you a ride? I turned to see Rita again, this time in the driver's seat of a shiny new Volkswagen Beetle. She was holding up traffic a bit, so I quickly gave her Swash's address. Her eyes lit up. No way. I live in the same neighborhood. I opened the car door and got in. Her daughter, Emily, was in the front seat, a small girl with rich brown hair and bright hazel eyes. She was practically her mother's twin. Rita tried to juggle introductions while driving, so I helped her out. Bradley and Emily gave quick, shy hellos and then quietly stared out the windows. I laughed at how similar they were. The rest of the car ride was full of casual conversation. Even the kids began to warm up and chat a bit. Before long, we reached our neighborhood. Thanks again, I said, getting out of the car. She waved and turned the corner. I had no idea she lived so close. Maybe Bradley had a point. This place could really use more community events. We got inside, and Bradley dashed off to his room to drop his bag. I went to the kitchen, stomach rumbling. We'd skipped our usual McDonald's stop, and I knew he'd be hungry too. I opened the fridge but didn't trust myself to cook anything without starting a small disaster. I grabbed the phone and ordered pizza instead. No point in pretending I was a chef. We sat on the couch, eating pizza and watching TV in silence. Around 5:50 p.m., Swash walked in. He looked tired, his smile faint and a little forced. He set his briefcase down and sank into the couch. "Hi," I said. "Hey. How was work?" "It was fine. I'm gonna go change." He stood up and headed to his room. I watched him loosen his tie and begin unbuttoning his shirt. It was turning into an unintentional fashion show, so I stood up and followed him. I stepped into his room and closed the door. He turned around, surprised at first, but his expression quickly shifted. "Look, I'm sorry about walking out on you," I began, "but you don't have to act like I did something terrible." "What do you mean? The silent treatment? Isn't that a bit much? I talked to you a few seconds ago. Only because Bradley was there. You've been avoiding me and we both know it." He sighed and rubbed his eyes. He looked absolutely drained. Maybe I am. That surprised me. I expected him to brush it off, maybe even tell me to leave. "So, what's going on? Is there something we can fix?" "Fix what?" "Our friendship. You're still upset." "I'm not mad at you, Mike. If anything, I'm trying not to be." I blinked. That was not what I expected to hear. Swash sat on the edge of the bed, visibly worn out. I stood near the door, watching him carefully. His voice was quiet as he finally said, "Work isn't fine, Mike. I just got out of a board meeting. They're considering letting me go." I froze. But Swash's words triggered a wave of thoughts in my head, and I instinctively sat down on the edge of the bed as my knees gave way. He stared at the floor, avoiding my gaze. Suddenly, his strange behavior over the past few days didn't seem so strange anymore. In fact, it all started to make sense. He was under an enormous amount of pressure, and I had only been adding to it. His job was on the line. If he lost it, finding another wouldn't be easy. Losing his income could mean losing the house. He and Bradley might have to move. New neighborhood, new school, new everything. And Bradley was just beginning to settle here. It couldn't have come at a worse time. "What exactly happened?" I asked. Not because I thought his answer would fix things, but because I needed to understand how it got this far. Swash slowly lifted his eyes to meet mine. "Well, it started after I got the idea for a new ad campaign, based on the Japanese content you showed me. I thought it was really creative, so I pitched the concepts to Rod and the others. I even showed them the videos. They liked them, most of them anyway, but a few people were nervous about whether the higher-ups would approve. I didn't think it'd be a problem. The ideas were just too strong to pass up." He paused and sighed, then continued. "So, I wrote draft scripts and shared them with Rodney. He had a few of his creative friends take a look. We made some adjustments, and pretty soon, we had a great presentation. All of this came together in about 2 days. It was only meant to be a pitch. And then?" I asked. He looked down again. "Then we started filming the new product range. I thought we could test the new scripts out. So I swapped them in." My brow furrowed. "You replaced the official scripts?" "Yeah, I know. It was reckless. But at the time, I thought it was worth the risk. The actors performed using the new scripts, and we shot the ads as written. Rod found out late. He panicked, rightfully so. I told him I'd take full responsibility. But by the time the director realized what had happened, the actors had already been paid. They refused to reshoot without another paycheck. Then the whole situation unraveled. The mistake was traced back to me and, well, here we are." I exhaled deeply as I took it all in. I'd never worked in a big corporation, but even as a former waiter, I knew one thing. There's always a chain of command. Skipping over it rarely ends well. Swash had made an impulsive decision. His heart was in the right place, sure, but rules are rules. There are consequences for not following them. But you haven't been fired, I said cautiously. No. Not yet. Why not? My direct supervisor vouched for me. I'm on probation, technically. But I can tell some people are just waiting for me to be made an example of. I gave him a gentle look. What you did wasn't exactly wise. I attempted a smile, trying to lighten the mood, but he didn't return it. I hated seeing him like this, burdened, defeated, but I also understood. He was stuck in limbo. Not fired, but not safe either. If he had been let go, at least he could have started planning his next move. Instead, everything felt uncertain. I reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. He rested his hand on top of mine, meeting my gaze. You'll be okay, Swash. You don't know that. I do, I said again, trying to sound more certain than I felt. It was the same thing I had said when Jason got hurt a few years ago. Maybe it was my way of staying calm, of pretending everything would work out when deep down, I wasn't sure at all. Swash glanced at my hand on his shoulder, and I quickly pulled it away. He seemed to flinch slightly but said nothing. We sat in silence for a few minutes. I knew he needed time to process everything, but I also wanted him to know he wasn't alone. Technically he was. I didn't have any real ties here. I could leave whenever I wanted. But still, I stayed. Bradley's probably hungry, he said out of the blue, standing up and heading to the kitchen. I sat there for a moment longer, guilt creeping in. If I hadn't shown him those videos in the first place, maybe he wouldn't have come up with the idea. Still, I didn't tell him to switch the scripts. That part was all on him. I sighed and followed him out. Swash was talking with Bradley in the kitchen, trying to stay engaged, but I could see the weight still hanging on him. I joined them at the table. Rita came home with us today, Bradley announced cheerfully as I walked in. Who's Rita? Swash asked. Just another parent from school, I explained. She lives nearby and offered us a ride. Swash nodded but didn't seem too interested. She also invited us to a small gathering, just something casual for the school parents to get to know each other. I've got the invite right here. When is it? He asked, though his tone was flat. I'm not sure, hang on. I grabbed my jacket from the couch and pulled the envelope from my pocket, handing it to him. He opened it and scanned the details. It's for the 7th. That's Sunday. He sighed, sounding almost disappointed. I know Sunday isn't ideal. She's a wedding planner, so maybe she's busy Saturday. That's not the issue, he interrupted. We can't go anyway. Why not? Sunday is Bradley's birthday. Suddenly it clicked. The code Swash had written on the note when he gave me the spare key, 1007. I'd been typing it without even thinking about its meaning. I'm going to be 5. Bradley beamed. I smiled back at him. Bradley looked genuinely excited about turning a year older. Watching him reminded me of how thrilled I used to be about birthdays as a kid. My parents always assumed it was the cake and candles that made me happy, but really, it was the idea of catching up to everyone else. Being the youngest in my class, with a birthday in April, always made me feel a little behind. Every birthday felt like progress, closer to fitting in, closer to being taken seriously. But over time, that excitement faded. By the time I turned 10, it didn't feel like a celebration anymore. My parents thought it was just me growing up, but deep down, I knew the truth. Birthdays had started to feel like a reminder. No matter how many I had, I'd always be playing catch-up. Wow, that's amazing, I said, surprised by how convincingly enthusiastic I sounded. Maybe I was just picking up on Bradley's mood. Swash smiled faintly and walked toward the kitchen to make dinner. I wasn't really hungry. Pizza had already taken up most of the space. Maybe I'll skip dinner, Swash. I'm still full, I said. All right. You hungry, Bradley? He asked. Bradley shook his head. Swash looked relieved. He clearly didn't mind only cooking for himself tonight. He peered into the fridge, pushing things around like he was on a mission. I found myself oddly curious about what he'd make. But when he pulled out a giant pack of cup noodles, I couldn't help but laugh. He turned around, raising an eyebrow. What? Nothing. I just thought you were planning one of your wild experiments. But then, cup noodles? I am planning one of my wild experiments. I grinned, still a little confused. He set the noodles on the counter and went back to the fridge, this time crouching to grab a bag of frozen shrimp. Then came a mixed bag of frozen veggies. He pulled soy sauce and oregano from the cabinet and turned back toward me, giving me a look that almost dared me to question him. Wait, so the noodles are just part of the recipe? I asked. Yep. No rule says you have to eat them plain. One of these days, you're going to invent something too weird to eat. Until then, he said, chuckling, I'll keep experimenting. I smiled, watching him. It had been a while since I'd seen him this relaxed. He set water to boil and began chopping the vegetables into even smaller pieces. Then he pulled out a strainer and a small wok. Once the water was ready, he poured it into the noodle cups. Where'd you learn all this? I asked, genuinely curious. It was hard to imagine a college athlete, who also worked part-time, finding the time to become a decent cook. My college roommate, he was obsessed with cooking, wanted to be a chef. I just picked up what I could. I'm not even half as good. You seem pretty good to me. You should have seen him. He made the most creative things. Once, he blended fruit, ice cream, and soda into these layered desserts. They never tasted the same twice. One time, he even mixed whipped cream with the fruit puree and layered that with ice cream. It was wild. Surprised you didn't gain a ton of weight. Oh, I did, he laughed. Especially after I got cut from the team my final year. That was my comfort food era. Had to lose it all after graduation. Do you have any pictures? I asked, teasing. Burn them all, he said with a grin. Hearing him laugh like that warmed my heart. It had been a long time since I'd heard that sound. Meanwhile, the noodles were ready. He drained them and put the wok on the stove, adding a bit of olive oil. It sizzled loudly as the shrimp hit the pan. He added a pinch of salt and glanced back at me. You don't cook much, do you? I shrugged. I can manage the basics. But anything beyond scrambled eggs? Nope. Maybe I'll teach you some stuff, if you don't mind secondhand lessons. I'll pass. I'd rather not set your kitchen on fire. Shouldn't you flip the shrimp or something? I'm waiting for the smell. The smell? Yeah. Cullen, my roommate, taught me to cook by scent. It takes practice, but you'll get it. We sat in silence for a moment. Then, slowly, the delicious aroma of shrimp filled the kitchen. I closed my eyes, letting the scent settle. That is what I was waiting for. When I opened my eyes, Swash was smiling proudly. He flipped the shrimp and tossed in the vegetables. Another burst of sizzling followed. Cool, a small voice chimed in. I turned, startled to remember Bradley was still there. He had a knack for moving quietly. He was always so observant. Why is that cool? I asked. Fried veggies, he replied, wide-eyed. I laughed. Of course. He'd grown up vegetarian, so fried vegetables must have felt like a treat. Swash added the noodles, tossed the mixture around, and sprinkled in some seasoning. The kitchen was filled with a savory scent that made my stomach growl, even though I'd claimed I wasn't hungry. Want a taste? He asked. Sure, I said, curiosity getting the better of me. Swash twirled some noodles onto a fork, added a shrimp and a bit of cabbage, and handed it to me. The moment it hit my tongue, I was surprised by how flavorful it was. Wow, that's really good. He laughed at my reaction. Bradley asked for a taste too, and while he didn't say much, his face said it all. He'd probably never had shrimp before. You're definitely going to have to teach me this, I said. Swash smiled. My phone suddenly rang. I checked the screen. Malone. Hey, Mal, I answered. Hey yourself. So, are you coming tonight? I didn't really have an answer prepared. With everything Swash had been going through, I felt like I needed to be there, for moral support, if nothing else. I could have said I was busy, but turning him down 2 days in a row didn't sit right with me. Besides, I had to admit, I was starting to miss him too. Sure, I said. I'll just let my friend know. But, do you need his permission to leave? Swash asked, raising an eyebrow. He's the worrying type, I replied, glancing at him. He gave me a look that was part confused, part serious. He must have picked up that I was talking about him, and now he was curious about who was on the other end of the call. Okay then. See you, babe, said the voice on the phone. See you. Bye. I hung up. Swash was watching me. Well, time for the awkward explanation. Malone, I said, keeping it brief. Oh. He looked down at his plate. We were supposed to hang out tonight. I just forgot to tell you. Okay. He rolled some noodles and took a bite, clearly trying to avoid saying anything else. Is Malone gay too? Bradley piped up, his big gray eyes full of curiosity. Yeah, he is, I answered with a small smile. He's my boyfriend. I thought you were gay for Daddy, Bradley said innocently. I paused, caught off guard. It made sense, he didn't know much about my personal life. No, sweetie. Daddy's just a friend, I told him gently. When did you start calling him Daddy? Anyway, I thought he was real Dad. Bradley looked thoughtful. Daddy said Dad would never hurt me again, and that I wouldn't have to see him anymore. So now he's just Daddy. Real Dad is the only dad now. I looked over at Swash. He was still eating, but I noticed a slight flicker of emotion in his eyes. A sadness he tried to hide. I'd seen that expression before, back at the museum when I told him I had a boyfriend. That had been awkward, but we were past that now. I checked the time, 7:35 p.m. I gotta go. Mal's probably waiting, I said, standing up. Swash gave a faint nod. Bradley looked uneasy. When are you coming back, Michael? Probably tomorrow. Don't wait up. But what if I get bad dreams again? I bent down, ruffling his hair. Then just tell them that when Michael gets back, they're going to be sorry. That should scare them off. I gave him a wink. He smiled. It was enough to reassure me. I stepped out and gently closed the door behind me. Outside, Malone greeted me quickly and pulled me into a hug. His energy was intense, almost overwhelming. We hadn't seen each other in a while, and it showed. He kissed my cheek, then held me close as we walked to his place. The tension between us, fueled by days apart, was hard to ignore. We spent the evening catching up, laughing, eating leftovers, and talking about the future. There was still electricity in the air, but for once, it wasn't rushed or chaotic. It was warm and comforting. Later that night, Malone dug through his drawer and said with a mischievous grin, "I've got a surprise for you." I tilted my head. Should I be nervous? He laughed. Maybe just a little. His playful tone and the sparkle in his eye made my heart skip. Even without knowing what it was, I was already smiling. Whatever it is, I said, don't make me regret coming over. Oh, you won't, he teased. But I might make you lose your voice from all the laughing. Thanks for listening to today's BL story. If it made your heart skip a beat, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Only here on BL Stories, where love knows no limits.